So today we've got a very, very special interview. We've got Jamie Jones-Buchanan, the professional rugby player, but also a Christian. Jamie, thanks so much for joining us. How are you doing?
It's a pleasure. Thanks for having me. I'm doing really well, thank you.
It's interesting, Jamie. You're a rugby player. Your sport is very masculine, macho, and you're a Christian at the same time. I mean, how do you deal with both of those? Give us an insight.
Well, being a Christian is just integrated into my life. I think my identity is in Jesus, in Christ, and the fact that I'm a rugby player is just a tent-making job in many respects. It's a job that I love doing. It's been the vehicle on which I've lived the majority of my life, gone on most of my journeys, met most of my friends, and learned most of my lessons. It's also the vehicle on which I became a Christian as well. So rugby league is massively important to me. When I became a Christian, my whole life was enhanced. You know, I'm not talking in a prosperity way. I just developed as a person, and somebody once pointed out to me that my playing career went through the roof as well. I became a better player. I grew in the faith. I became a better husband, I believe, a better dad. And, knowing who the character, the person of Jesus Christ was, has helped me in my life no end, not just on the field, but off it as well. So it's very important to me, my faith, and something I'm really privileged to be able to go out and tell other people about.
That's so interesting how it's like your pressure, your stresses and everything that you went through during your playing career, it kind of was released when you found Christ in your life. He gave you that kind of peace. Is that how you explain it?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, that pressure. And, I'm not impervious to feeling stress and pressure. I guess it's where you put that trust in. Obviously, trust in my faith, trust in God's will. You know, the difficult moments in life, I've always looked back on as refining moments. And I think there's a lot of metaphors in the Bible about silver and gold. One of my favourite proverbs: the crucible's for silver, the furnace for gold, but the Lord tests the hearts. And when you realise that in reality, gold and silver are precious metals that people hold a great deal of value to. But when you pull them out of the earth and their mind, they're not pure. They're impure. So they've got to go in the furnace, they've got to go in the crucible, and they've got to be refined. And in the same respect, adversity, sometimes persecution, suffering, can refine our hearts. God's testing the hearts. Can you stay in there? Can you trust in God that He'll bring you through? And I don't think He'll ever put you through anything that you can't withstand or cope with. So it's about trust for me and God's will. And I think my favourite part in the Gospels would be Jesus at the Gethsemane when He's asking God the Father to take that cup away from Him. But He says, "Not my will, but yours be done."
Fantastic, Jamie. Now take us back. Where did your journey in Christ begin? Were you a Christian from a child? Were your parents Christian? Give us a little bit of a background.
No. So it's interesting. Not really grew up in any Christian background. I went to church, and I went to for things like christenings and weddings and formal events. Very sort of cultural Christianity, if you like. But yeah. I didn't know anything much about the theology of the Bible, didn't know any of the books or who Jesus was, what He'd come to do, that He'd manifest into human history some 2,000 years ago to save humanity. And it was when I was young, my nana used to say prayers on the night. She used to say things like "God's good," but as I say, I never knew what that really meant. I did believe in something, as you quite often hear when you say to people, "Do you believe in God?" Well, I believe in something. But it wasn't until I met a New Zealander called Ali Lauatiti, who came over to play for Leeds Rhinos in 2004. And through his own witness, playing at the Leeds Rhinos, I found somebody who I trusted. He was a colleague, a friend, somebody who I could ask about his faith. And he made no secret of the fact that he was a Christian, about Christianity, and he invited me along to church. And that's how I started back in about 2006. It was quite obvious that despite being an extremely fierce and talented, ferocious player on the pitch, that he was one of these guys that didn't want to be yoked in a negative way with unbelievers. And the fact that he's a little bit different really shone out. And I think everybody knew that it was because of his faith and respected that as well. So Ali Lauatiti, he didn't have to say much. He shone out just through his actions, really. And he raised a lot of questions, and I pray that I can do something similar. I think the boys heavily know about my faith because they quite often say, "Oh, Jones, you don't want to get involved in this, or you won't be interested in that because you're a Christian, obviously." And whenever they recall me before being a Christian, some of the wild things they used to get up to. They say, oh, that was Jonesy BC, before Christ. So there's obviously a massive contrast between when I wasn't a Christian and when I changed and Jesus became a big part of my life. But the message I always try to get across to people as a rugby player is that we play rugby or any sport really. You play for medals and championships, and people can invest almost their life and soul into that, almost idolatrously. And what I've learned is when you win a trophy, it never lasts forever. Everything in life, gold, silver, medals, wealth, money, whatever it is materialistic that you can lay your hands on, it succumbs to the laws of thermodynamics. Everything's entropic, everything breaks down and dies. And the only place I've found something that lasts forever is in Jesus, in the gospel. So the journey of playing sport and playing rugby league is just a vehicle, but in and amongst that, it's about the relationships and the people that I'm fortunate to cross paths with. And by God's grace, my goal is to build treasure in heaven through forming those relationships as a Christian, witnessing, telling people about my faith, and hopefully leading other people to Christ as well. Having won pretty much every domestic trophy in rugby league, we won it in 2014, the Challenge Cup final. So just to take you really through, we won 6 grand finals, 3 World Club challenges, 2 League Leaders trophies, and we couldn't win this Challenge Cup. It's like the FA Cup version for rugby league, and we couldn't win that. And then we did win it. And what was really interesting was when we won it, it was about 2/3 of the way through the season, and we never won another game after that. We absolutely got destroyed, and almost the success was almost as bad as defeat if you handle it the wrong way. And what I realised was whether you win or lose on a Friday night isn't as important as how you get up and deal with the experience on a Saturday morning. Life's about experiences and using experiences to live for something else. And as Ecclesiastes says, if God's not at the centre of it, then it's all meaningless. So I'm just trying to build treasure in heaven on this vehicle of rugby league.
Jamie, just give us a little insight into the pressures that you go through. You're playing in front of thousands of fans in the stadium, millions of people around the world. The importance of having such a strong mental strength. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I think rugby league's a game where mental strength is paramount, really. And it's hard because, as any sport, it's a results-based industry. So you've got to go out there and you've got to perform, you've got to win. Quite often you're playing in front of, 80,000 people at Wembley in the Challenge Cup final, being fortunate to do that plenty of times. Won a few, lost a few. But the added extra with rugby league is because of the physical nature of the game, you might have a couple of broken fingers, a broken jaw, a piece of your teeth going through your lip and all kinds of physical pain. So there's that side of it. And whilst you're struggling physically, you might be out of breath, got a lot of fatigue in there, you've got a lot of big guys trying to knock your head off who are twice the size of you, or try to dominate you. And you've got to try and play well as well. You've still got to perform the skill, you've got to make the tackles, you've got to put the right passes on, make the right decisions. So it can be a cauldron. But like anything in life, it's quite relative. You prepare for that. And I think, as with most things in life, preparation is key. But it's interesting, because you're in that cauldron, we're tested to our limits at times. And it's quite funny. The pastor at our church once used a fantastic analogy. He said that human beings are a lot like toothpaste. On the outside, we can look like whatever we want, but when we get squeezed, when we're under the pressure, whatever's inside will inevitably come out. And there's nowhere more squeezy than in the pressure of playing a game of rugby league sometimes. And for me, that's tough. It can work for me and against me in that, being a Christian, I hope that and pray that whenever I get squeezed, it's a Christ-like Jamie that comes out and reacts in the right ways. And I think for the most part it is, but I'm certainly nowhere near perfect, and I have my moments, particularly in big games. And I'll tell you where I have the biggest difficulty. It's not when somebody smacks me and can deal with that. I can deal with the pain. It's not when somebody gets something wrong, or if I get something wrong. I think a lot of the time, and I'm not blaming referees, by the way, it's when injustices happen. So if you think about reading the Bible on a daily basis, you see a perfect judge in God and a perfect moral law or moral conduct, if you like. And when human beings referee a game or make decisions, and when players make decisions, we're inevitably human, so we get it wrong quite often. And injustices is what really gets me. The funny side as well, the flip side, is I make errors, technical errors. So I've been guilty lots of times of giving a high shot and knocking somebody's teeth nearly out. And I once gave a testimony at a church in Wigan, and he said, "Oh, I watched you a few weeks ago," and we'd just beaten Wigan, by the way, as well, and I scored a try. But he said, "I watched you a few weeks ago, and you took somebody's head off, you gave him a right clatter around the head." And I said, "I know, I don't get everything right, but I have been told it's better to give than receive," so that's how I brought it off. But it's a test. The flip side is, I'm quite often exposed to a lot of people, get a lot of interviews, and I'd like to hope, by God's grace, again, that in my vocabulary and the things that I'm saying, the things that I'm talking about, are gospel driven.
Now, give us a little insight into the dressing room of a rugby team. You're a Christian and you're very outspoken as well. What sort of reaction do you get from your fellow players? Are they intrigued? Are they asking questions?
Yeah, they ask me questions all the time. Quite often when I'm on my own, so they say, "Oh, John, what does the Bible say about this, and what does it say about that?" And when there's ever a political story going on in world news, what does the Bible say about this and that? And these are all great opportunities, of course, to talk about my faith and try and express what it is I believe. It's very tough, though, in the media these days, particularly with social media, because they get dragged into these paradigms or these cultural beliefs, the memes, and I'm not talking about the crazy little photographs that go around with silly messages on. I'm just talking about the cultural way of thinking, and whatever the cultural way of thinking is, people quite often get sucked into, and that doesn't always flow in the same direction as the gospel or the Bible way of thinking. So there's a lot of conversations that spring up there. But I think, again, a bit like I mentioned, Ali, the best way to deal with that is just to go out and not just speak it, but say it, pray it, speak it, and go perform it as well. And just be the best version of yourself. And whilst it might not sound like rocket science, it's not. Quite often it's quite simple. The changing room dynamics are interesting. There's two players in my career that have had a massive influence. Both retired at the end of 2015 after winning the treble, the first time in Leeds Rhinos history. We won the Challenge Cup, the Grand Final, and the League Leaders Shield. And they're called Jamie Peacock and one of the best mates in the whole world, Kevin Sinfield. Now, Kevin Sinfield was our captain. Jamie Peacock was an international captain, but he sat just under Kev at Leeds. And the way I like to describe the team dynamic, particularly with us three, when you talk about prophets, priests and kings, Kevin Sinfield was a very priestly person in that he was very methodical, process-driven, and he was the captain in the sense that games on a Friday night were won at 9 a.m. on a Monday morning, because he knew that if we ticked all the right boxes, made all the right preparations, did our weights right, our meetings correctly, we did the video in the right way, we went out and trained hard, we ticked all the little boxes. If we did that really well throughout the week, there's a chance of winning the game on a Friday night. And I describe it a bit like an arrow. An arrow, if you've got an arrow flowing in a direction, he was the flight on the back of the arrow that guided the team. Then you had Jamie Peacock, who was like the king. And by the king, he was a ferocious guy who would be at the front of the battle. He would be like the arrowhead. And when Kev got us where we needed to be, he would be the guy that struck the killer blow in terms of sporting performance. And I was almost like a prophetic guy who'd come out with something a little bit off the wall, a little bit left field. What is he talking about type thing, a bit metaphysical at times. And my aim was always to try and keep the team grounded when we were playing really well, and to lift us up when things weren't going very well, and try and keep the team positive and just help in a metaphorical type of way. And I've learnt so many lessons, the parallels between sport and faith and business and all these other avenues in life have been immense for me. And it's a privilege now at 35 to be able to share some of those things. I'm a trustee at Leeds Rhinos Foundation, a charitable arm, so I do a lot of charitable stuff. I'm a trustee on the board of another charity educational organisation called AIM Education. I'm a governor at Priesthorpe School, do a lot of coaching, do a lot of media work, trying to showcase the personalities in rugby league through a TV show on a website called Rugby AM. And whatever I'm doing, I'm always trying to lift people up, to encourage others, and to just to support them. And the phrase that keeps coming up to me, that's such a killer, is social isolation.
Yeah.
And I say it again, God said it's not good for man to be alone. And when people are alone and they're not interacting with others, particularly when they're going through adversity, then they really struggle. They call rugby an impact sport, and believe me, it is. But ask him, or her, or them, and they'll tell you that real life hurts more than any tackle. The body heals fast, bones knit back together, bruises come and go. But the scars caused by mental health, dementia, loneliness, poverty and low self-esteem go much deeper. It takes time, patience, perseverance and lots of determination just to get the ball rolling. That's why the real battle is not here on the field of play, but out there behind closed doors and closed curtains. In the playground, in the shadows, away from the floodlights. It's in the minds of the children who think they can't, and the adults who think they can't carry on. It's in the hearts of those who don't know where to turn, and those who have nowhere else to go. In this arena, the rewards for victory are smiles, not silverware. The price of failure, unthinkable. But all is not lost. While there's still time on the clock, and the will to fight, and the strength in these legs, there's still everything to play for.
Give us an insight, just inside the dressing room, shall we say. You've just finished a huge game in front of thousands of fans. You're coming off the pitch, maybe your team's won or you've lost. You're coming out, you're coming home. What happens then? How do you unwind? Is it the second you leave the stadium, that's it, you've disconnected? Or is it for the rest of the evening you're thinking about the game? Give us a little insight.
Oh, yeah, absolutely tuned in for hours. I mean, one of the problems with rugby league players is that they struggle to sleep. And certainly if you play at 8 o'clock on a Friday night, that's the kick-off time. So by the time you've finished, you've got showered, you've had the post-match presentations and a bit of food, you're talking around 11 o'clock. And then you're going home and you're thinking about, could I have done this better? Could I have worked harder there? What's my coach going to be thinking about this tomorrow? How do we need to be better for next week? And quite often it's 2:30, 3 o'clock, just sat or laid staring at the roof because the adrenaline is still pumping around. And that's tough because obviously when you've had an exhaustive piece of activity that lasts potentially up to 80 minutes, the last thing you want to do is stay awake all night.
Yeah.
And then have to get up and train again. So that's something we actually have to manage. And we wear these watches now, actually, that measure movement. They're quite prevalent now, these sporting watches. And they measure how much sleep we're actually getting during the week, and they will tailor the training to suit. So if lads are coming in and they're testing quite low on some of the flexibility tests or the jump tests that we do, then the coaches will wind back the training and make sure the lads are getting the right amount of rest, because people quite often think that, you know, it's all about training, it's all about lifting weights, it's all about running fast, and rest can be just as important for your physical and mental health. And it amazes me, when people go see psychiatrists or, I don't know, I'm not being judgmental, but people get really anxious, they get really stressed or depressed, and you ask them how much sleep they're getting, and quite often it might be a medical reason why they're not getting sleep, but other times they're just up on the phones or playing Xboxes, and I'm guilty of this as well. And sleep is one of the most important things that you can get, and I believe that most mammals on the planet die quicker if you're starved of sleep than you do if you're starved of food. Now, if you were starving yourself of food, everybody would be like, what are you doing? No, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
For whatever reason, people don't seem too bothered about others being starved of sleep. And it's so important. And all these other stress factors, what you're eating, what you're drinking, who your friends are, there's so many variables that holistically create good health. And I think it's important that we have a healthy balance of all of them.
Excellent. So, Jamie, we're talking about faith. Tell us the importance of having the relationship with Christ. How important is that in your life?
Well, we were created by God, and Jesus is that manifestation of God with us. Is Emmanuel, and to get the best out of life, I think it's best to understand that relationship and that connection and be more Christ-like. So, for me, growing up, one of my heroes as a rugby player was Kevin Sinfield, because he was the best and probably still is, as far as a model goes of how to be a fantastic professional sportsman. Now, the author of life is the best person to model yourself on if you want to be a great human being. So my faith and understanding who Christ is at the centre of who I am. And I'm currently going through a Bible reading plan that started on 1st of January, which will get me through the whole Bible in just short of a year. And to be able to read that, as I said earlier, is like food for the soul. And it really impresses upon me God's character, the way that he lived on this planet when he was manifesting in human history 2,000 years ago. And I want to try and replicate that the best I can, even in this crazy, hectic, busy modern world. And whilst a lot of people think, that was all 2,000 years ago and life's a lot different, actually the core of what's at the human heart are exactly the same issues, exactly the same challenges, exactly the same obstacles, stumbling blocks that were before people 2,000 years ago. So for me to live the best life I can in the 80 to 120 to the next 5 minutes that I've got on this earth is best done through understanding who Jesus is.
For any viewers who are watching us today, maybe they don't currently have a relationship with Christ, or they don't know anything about Jesus, you're talking about reading the Bible, and they're probably asking the question, where would I start? What sort of advice would you give to them, Jamie?
Well, I'd find a good local church and find other Christians who might be around you and ask them about their faith and ask questions. Jesus, one of my favourite Bible quotes, it always goes, it's the email signature, I quite like it on the bottom of my email signature, Revelation 3:20, when Jesus is talking about the fact that he's knocking, he's at the knocking and they don't let him in. And you can do that a variety of ways, ideally through finding like-minded people who want to know who Jesus is. And I'll be honest with you, listen, when I first went to church, I thought I was going to be surrounded by a load of people like Ned Flanders from Simpsons. I didn't know what to expect, to be honest with you. And there's a few of them who wear sandals and jumpers and say, I did that. But they're just one group of people. And like a team, as I mentioned earlier, the church are full of all kinds of people with all kinds of gifts from all kinds of nations and backgrounds. And there's a lot of people there who you can come together with, get some real fellowship and enhance life. I've said a fair few times on this interview that it's not good for man or woman to be alone, for human beings to spend time alone. So go find other like-minded people and try and be attuned to reconcile with the author of life.
Fantastic, Jamie. And finally, what sort of advice would you give to any of the young viewers watching us today who are going through the stresses and pressures of their lives? Maybe they're going through exams, they're thinking about their future, they don't know where or what step to take in their future. What could you say to them today?
I would say that the biggest lessons on my journey have been through adversity, through a bit of suffering, through errors, making errors, through failing. Now, failing is a big word. I don't think you ever fail until you stop trying. And what people miss out quite often when an athlete goes into a school is they take the medals with them and say, yeah, this is what I've done, this is what I've achieved. Well, that's nice to know, but what people want to understand is, how did you do it? You know, why did you do it? And we can only do that by having these life experiences. And I would say, first of all, trust in the preparation that you've put into the hard work. And there's a really interesting one actually called the Stanford Marshmallow Experiment. Have a look at that. It's all about delayed gratification, having the ability to persist for long periods of time for a reward that's a long way down the road. Now, my worry with the youth of 2000 and, this millennial generation is that everything's in short packets. So whether it be a tweet, whether it be a short YouTube video, people struggle to concentrate for any length of time. Not everybody, it's not excessive, but the real worthwhile things in life take a long, long time to achieve, take a lot of stumblings, a lot of failures, a lot of setbacks, and a lot of persistence. One of my staple quotes that I like to talk about biblically is when Paul talks about running the race. He runs a race doesn't run a race for a crown that doesn't last. He runs the race for a crown that lasts forever. But his race is lifelong. It's however long he's got left to live. You know, to live is Christ, to die is gain. And Paul understands that. And whilst he's going through the life, he's got the thorns in his flesh that are causing all kinds of pains and suffering. And that's what life can throw at us sometimes. So for all those young people out there, just keep persevering, keep being persistent, keep having humility when you achieve your goals as well. Because I tell you, you're only 5 minutes from another fall, and you've got to get yourself back up. So well done for being in the arena and having the courage to embark first and foremost, but just keep having the humility in the successes and the perseverance in the adversity. And certainly, as I said before, Ecclesiastes, read the first chapter, start off by saying meaningless, everything's meaningless, because it's all already been done. Everything under the sun has been done by everybody else throughout the whole of human history. And it's not worthwhile unless you're building treasure in heaven and doing it with God at the centre of it. So I'd encourage you to lay that Christ-like foundation.
Brilliant. Jamie Jones-Buchanan from Leeds Rhinos and England Rugby, thank you so much indeed for joining us today.
Pleasure.
You've been extremely inspirational. Thank you.
Cheers.